finally I got my mom to come and join me, and she's a big Dune fan. And it was possibly after watching The Fellowship of the Ring, which was probably the most transcendent movie-going experience of my life, not because it was the greatest movie of all time, but just because it was perfectly placed for me
It
at a
is.
certain
It is.
moment in my life.
Is a pretty great movie, though.
It is a pretty good movie. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to not be entirely negative. Welcome, everyone, to this impromptu episode of Fantasy for Our Time. I guess that's what this is, although we've already been talking with Richard here for the past 20 minutes about Warhammer 40K,
That's
which
right.
is very relevant to our discussion on Dune today. But we're going to be very disciplined. Ha ha ha. Everybody's laughing in the chat. And we're going to focus on Dune 1 and Dune 2, not by the great Frank Herbert, but by the possibly great Denis Villeneuve. Although, great or not, we will have to decide by the end of this conversation. Richard, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Good to be seen.
Well, some people are listening, and I'm
Yeah,
sure it's
yeah.
good to be listened to as well.
I have been told I have a great face for radio, so
The great compliment, yes. We actually don't have as much time as we normally do this time around. It's my birthday. I'm 41 years old today, and my wife is taking me on a surprise something.
Mhm.
And I have a deadline.
Well,
So we're
many
going
years.
to keep this very not meandering. And again, the chat is erupting in laughter, which they should do. But I wanted to talk for a while about Dune, both positive and negative, and Richard wanted to talk about it too. So
Yep.
we're very happy to do it. Richard, I'm going to start us off today without
Yeah.
too much preamble, and I'm just going to. So the first thing I want to talk about is the things that I liked, because let's start with the positive, as I have a sneaking suspicion there's going to be a bit more negative than positive. That might just be the nature of our conversations.
So that's interesting because I think I have mostly positive things to say about the movies, actually.
Good man. So I'll
So
let you do
we'll
most of
see.
the talking then. But
Yeah.
I do have a few. I do have a few things that I'm not crazy about. But let's talk about the positives.
All right, let's go.
First off, okay. So I watched Dune 1. It was the first movie that I saw after COVID. So you can imagine what this means. I haven't been in the movie theater for 2.5 years because I have kids too. So add like lots of small kids and the inability to take the time to actually watch a movie
Yep.
with limitations in terms of genre preferences from wife, who has very limited genre preferences, period. And kids not allowing me to go by myself, me not allowing me to go by myself. So finally I got my mom to come and join me, and she's a big Dune fan. And it was possibly after watching The Fellowship of the Ring, which was probably the most transcendent movie going experience of my life, not because it was the greatest movie of all time, but just because it was perfectly placed for me at a certain moment in my life.
It is a pretty great movie, though.
It is a pretty good movie. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to not be entirely negative. But this one was almost up there. It was fantastic. I loved everything about it. Okay, so let me tell you about all the things I loved. I loved the little carved bull in the first 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought that was I thought that set the tone for everything, because you could tell that Villeneuve knows his source material, he respects it, and he's happy to put in the little subtle details that allow for the grand canvas of the whole thing to come out in on multiple levels. So you're getting the big, super scenic, huge, really cool, great cinematic stuff, but you're also getting the small stuff, which oftentimes is the stuff that gets left out, especially in the 2-hour movie stuff. You can do that stuff in streaming. You can't do it so often in the big ones.
Yep.
I thought the scene with the Sardaukar was awful in the best possible way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's so cool, and I hate these guys.
Mm-hmm. It's awful. Duncan Idaho is the greatest Duncan Idaho ever. I'm not sure he's entirely accurate, but I don't care. I think he's great.
Should a man named Duncan Idaho be like a Maori? Who cares?
I don't care. I don't care.
It doesn't matter.
I don't care. The costumes are great. The acting is fantastic, even though I'm not really a huge fan of little French boy. That's what I'm gonna call him from now on, little French boy. And I don't like that beta males are now uh, the stand-in for big major Hollywood movie star. But that's perhaps a conversation for a different time. And the music, the sound editing, absolutely off the charts. Uh, the pacing of it was great.
Mhm.
I loved the whole. I mean, it was like a single breath.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and what else? What else? What else? And I'll tell you more as we go on. But these are the things that really, really stood out. The okay, so I loved Jessica and
Oh, that actress,
Leo
what's her name? Rebecca. What's
Ferguson.
her name? Ferguson
Yeah,
is she's always good.
yeah, she is. She is, and
She's always
she's a
good.
fantastic Jessica. Oscar Isaacs is a really, really good Duke Leto. Their
Hmm.
relationship is very well done. The hunter seeker scene was almost lifted from my brain.
Yeah.
Really, really well done. All the gross stuff with the Harkonnens, of course, was very, very well done. But that's, these days, anything that's gross and awful is easy to do. It's much harder to do the good stuff. One of my favorite scenes was the scene in the cemetery, which is not canon. It's not in the book. But I thought it did a fantastic job setting the relationship between the Duke and his son and all the nuances and all the political ramifications, everything stuck into a fantastic little short scene that didn't do
Yeah.
all this ridiculous exposition, managed to really, really tightly put in a bunch of stuff that included interpersonal communication, included world building, included good character acting. What about you, Richard? What'd you like
Um, I liked
in
all of
Dune
that
One?
stuff. I mean, so the most important thing to me, being the kind of person that I am, was that the shield fighting be good.
Yes. Oh,
Um,
totally, totally with you there.
and
You mean you don't like the block shields in
partly
your old
I'm,
David
you
Lynch's
know,
version?
I'm mostly just still traumatized from the little voice modulators they were using.
Oh,
And it's just for the oh my gosh. Anyway, so I was mostly I really wanted the shield fighting to be good, and it was.
yeah.
And it looked great. I mean, the actors that they brought in for Duncan Idaho and Gurney were both great. I really
Gurney's
enjoyed
so good.
Gurney. Really loved Gurney in the second movie
Oh,
as well. And
oh, the
uh
Gom Jabbar scene. Yeah, totally. And John Simmons is mentioning the Gom Jabbar scene. Gom Jabbar scene was really, really, really good.
yeah, that was really intense. I thought the way that they portrayed the use of the voice throughout the films
Mhm.
was really nifty. Um, and yeah, I mean
By the way,
the
did you notice the stalker references in those scenes?
in the voice scenes.
Yeah, especially when she's training him in the voice in the beginning. There's the thing about moving the and it just occurred to me right now. Moving the cup of water,
Hmm.
totally Tarkovsky. It's
Yeah,
a direct
I did
reference to
I
Tarkovsky.
didn't think about it, but I mean, there's no way that that was missed.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, the I went to go see the first one in IMAX with my wife, and it was kind of like a whole thing. Like I'd read Dune before, but she'd never read it, and so we read the book together as a way to prep to go see the movie. And it was just it was a great experience. I mean, it was a good movie going experience. I think that, when I think back on the movie, I don't so much think back on it as a series of I don't think of it as a series of scenes. Like
Mm,
it's sort of like a complete painting in my mind. It's
mm.
hard to yeah, explain, but yeah, so that's so honestly, the first movie was just really, really successful. I don't have a lot of negatives to say about it. I think that so for instance, the way that they depict the Harkonnens, um, that's not how they're depicted in the books, like not even close.
Okay, talk more about that.
In the books, it's very strongly implied that the Harkonnens are, I'm sorry, a bunch of homosexual pedophiles.
Well, at least the
And
Baron is.
well, yeah, but even the way that Fade Ralpha is depicted, like in the books, like it's very clear he's kind of like lisping, limp-wristed, like
Yeah,
they
but
they
doesn't he dispatch female prostitutes in the book?
yeah, yeah, but they for various reasons, I think that they decided, if we make all of all of these bad guys like super effeminate, it's not going to play well. But
Oh, totally.
that's
No,
very
that's
much
clear.
how
That's clear.
but
Yeah.
that's very much how the Harkonnens come across in the
Yep.
books. And so
That's fair.
in that sense, there's an extra level of sleaze
Hmm.
that they actually removed from the Harkonnens,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm mostly okay with that. Like I don't feel
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
would
It's not
have added
pleasant.
much to have it in. Like I don't want to see it. I'd rather
No.
these people weren't on the screen anyway.
Yep.
Um, so there were some. I mean, all the casting just felt really, really good to me, and in particular the Lady Jessica, which is for me, she's probably the standout in both films.
Yeah.
Is um, I guess one of the things that a lot of people are mad about, I'll be interested to hear your opinion, will be Zendaya and as Chani and like all that stuff. But
I'll leave that for later.
yeah. But but yeah, I don't know. I really thought that the way that everything was put together, especially the first film, like I said, in my mind, I don't think of it as a succession of scenes. It's just sort of like a single milieu, just like a long painting
Well, for me, book
in
one
my
is definitely
mind.
that. Definitely that. Book two. So I'll talk a little bit about my experience of watching book two. It was nowhere near the same. I was by myself, away from my family in a time in a kind of a weird, difficult slash like kids were sick and I was on a business trip and nobody was
Hmm.
happy and it was all kind of universally miserable and I was hoping for a similar experience
Yeah.
to Dune 1. And if there was anything that bothered me about Dune 1, by the way, because I promised I would say negative things, and I can't possibly, leave a video without saying something negative, right? I mean, um, is the very strange choice to portray Liette as a black woman when Liette is very
Oh,
clearly a colonizing white man. Um,
I completely forgot about this. That was such a weird choice
yeah,
because if you wanted to like put some diversity in the film,
that is the
that
one
was
character you wouldn't choose to
a
diversify.
huge misunderstanding,
Yes.
like in a really, really big way. I forgot about her because she turns out to be very unimportant in the film, basically.
Well,
You know?
except that yes, she does. She gives them refuge for like half a second, and it
Right.
gives the opportunity for the super cool Duncan Idaho fight. That is her purpose. Her purpose
That's
is
her
to allow
purpose.
Duncan Idaho to have a super cool fight.
Yeah. It was a super cool fight. But
Oh
but
yeah,
the,
and
the
have
character of
spit
Liet
coffee, which
Kynes,
was cool.
yeah, right, yeah. The character of Liet Kynes is a lot more important in the books. In terms of so there's this thing going on, and this is one of the things. So there's really two aspects of the books that they just could not work into the film.
Yeah.
And probably it's better they didn't try. One is the way that all of the politics of the Lanzarote work,
Yeah.
which uh if people read Dune and hate it, they usually hate it because of that.
Yep.
Right? They're like, I don't what's going on, you
Yeah.
know? Um but there's a reason Star Wars Episode One begins with a trade negotiation that goes badly.
Yeah.
And the reason is Dune. Like there is a certain kind of person who, in their space opera, they sort of expect like imperial politics and trade negotiations and
All
federations and
right,
all.
everybody, you heard Richard say it. If you want to blame if you want to blame George Lucas for episode one, don't blame Frank Herbert.
I mean, yeah. Um, we can talk about Episode One sometime. There's actually a lot of things about that movie that I like, but anyway,
Did
I'm
you
not
ever
saying
watch
it's
it
a good
without
movie.
sound?
No, what?
Okay, so apparently, so there's this great book called I keep forgetting the title, something like How Star Wars Took Over the Universe.
Mhm.
It's a fantastic book. It's really long. It's like 700 pages,
Mm.
and it's all about the history of Star Wars, but it also has these like random asides about the ancillary life of the merchandise and like how people build their own stormtrooper suits
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
assemble in various troops and gather at various events and stuff like this.
Right, yeah.
And
501st
it
Legion and
talked
all
it
that
talked
stuff.
about in great detail about the mixed reception for the prequels. And I can't remember in what context, but it was suggested by the author that either some people do this or that it's recommended that you watch it as a silent film and actually apparently it becomes much more intelligent. Like uh George Lucas can't do dialogue because he's
Well, of course he can.
steeped in silent film.
Even as a kid, by the way, I just hated the dialogue, and even the original Star Wars, I was always like, "This is the worst dialogue I've ever heard." And I was like 8 at the time. By the
Right.
way, nobody will invite you back to their birthday party if you do this as an 8-year-old. So
Not
so
that that ever
anyway,
stopped either of us.
right, exactly. So that thing one is all the like the trade stuff and the it's actually not super clear unless you've read the books. It's not actually super clear why spice is so important
Yeah.
in the films.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's
Yes.
a lot of things like that that basically they sort of assume you're going to know or just
Right. There's nothing about the
understand. Yeah,
navigators at all, right? I mean, they
right.
basically
The navigators do appear in the
yes, but you
second
don't know
movie,
that
like
you
in
don't
a
know who they
very
are.
brief scene, but unless you know that they're navigators, it just won't do anything for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so that was thing one. The second thing that's also like a really important component of the books that was obviously missing from the films was the ecological aspect, the way that
Yes. Okay, we're gonna talk about that.
yeah, so the basically for people who don't know, if you read the books, there's a lot of emphasis that's actually placed on figuring out, and it takes people. It's like nobody has ever really figured out. It's one of the mysteries that unravels, through the first 2 or 3 books is what is the exact life cycle of the sandworm,
Right.
and there are
Right.
like these sand plankton and sand
Hmm.
trouts
Yep.
and sand, and but basically all of these things eventually become the worms,
Yep.
and because the worms hate water. They're basically hydrophobic.
Yep.
Um, that's why desert is a dune planet.
Right.
It's because the smaller creatures that are like the pre-worm sand trout sequester the water and turn it into spice.
Right.
Right. And
That and
basic yeah,
that's the real tension at the heart of everything is that the Fremen want to make this into the Garden of Eden,
right.
and um, if it's not in the best interest of anybody other than the
Right.
Fremen.
And so, but because that's the thing, if it actually, it's not in the best interest of the Fremen either, because if all the Fremen are addicted to spice because they live on Arrakis, so
Right.
if the spice goes away, most of the Fremen will die, but also that nobody will ever be able to travel,
Right.
via
Yeah,
interstellar
it
travel
would be the
ever.
end of this society.
Yeah, end of the civilization, right? And part of the God Emperor Leto's golden path, if you really want me to push up my nerd glasses,
There you go.
right, is actually breaking the overdependence on spice, within humanity in the same way that the Butlerian Jihad was originally intended to break humanity's overdependence on thinking machines.
Right.
So this is the basic idea that's behind Dune, is this idea that humanity stagnates because we become over reliant on certain kinds of technology. And then you have to have these basically jihads, like you have to have these really crazy things that happen that disrupt things enough that so humanity was over reliant on thinking machines, and then the Butlerian Jihad happened, and there's whatever Frank Herbert's original version of that might have been, and then there's
Which
the
is
one that
probably
his son
nothing like Terminator 2.
nothing like Terminator 2, and then his son wrote a version which is basically
Is
Terminator 2.
Terminator 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but then going from and then humanity evolved, and the way that they evolved, was to basically develop the navigators and the Reverend Mothers, and basically these psychic slash prescient human beings who
Superhumans,
were
yeah.
who were basically enhancing themselves through the use of mental powers and also spice, like some
Right.
combination of the
And
two.
then you get the superhuman in the Kwisatz Haderach, which is
Right,
kind of
right, right. Yeah, and that's the idea, is that the superhuman is, in some ways, he's supposed to be Nietzsche's, like,
yeah.
Obermann. Like
Yeah.
he's supposed to be the one who comes across, comes along, and then leads humanity into whatever the next stage of development is supposed to be.
Right.
And the mistake of the Bene Gesserit is basically the idea that we could control the Ubermann,
Yeah.
which means that, by the way, you've not read Nietzsche, but in any case,
Right.
in any case, yeah. So that's the
So this is really
yeah.
interesting because okay, so let me cut you off a little bit because this is getting to a point that I'll get to book to movie two in a second, but
Yeah.
there's this really cool I can't for the life of me, I couldn't find the video and I can't remember the guy who did it. There's a really great channel that's basically a gamer channel. I can't remember the guy's name, drive me crazy, but he did this video about what he thinks would be the best intro to a Dune movie.
Mm,
And he leans into all of that stuff, all the stuff that's missing
yeah.
out, which is really interesting. He all the stuff that Denis cuts out, he leans into it in the first scene. Basically, he has Liette discovering the Fremen as the perfect fighting force to
Right.
counter the
Stilgar
Sardaukar.
and yeah.
Um, and as somebody who was initially the white colonizer into a non-white culture and feeling this tremendous amount of white guilt, he essentially comes into the Fremen and offers himself as the solution to their problem of being
Right.
the slave race. He says, "I want to give you Arrakis back so that you can make it into the paradise that you want it to be." And this scene, which is very very effective, and then is the first scene in the perspective movie. It immediately switches and goes into Duke Leto training his Arakeen warriors in the weirding way, with the implicit connection being made that if you were to combine the Fremen with the Arakeen warriors, you would have something that would overtake the entire universe.
Yep.
And immediately you have the setup for all of the politics that get so annoying that people don't like that you don't have to get into for the rest of the story. You can just go, you follow the rest of the plot of the novel, and you're fine because you understand the stakes of it all. So it's interesting that Villeneuve chose to do the opposite. He chose to leave all of that out, leave it up
Yep.
to kind of, we've all seen Game of Thrones. We know what political gamesmanship looks like. Let's just focus on on the journey of Paul as false Messiah, which in book one was fine. But because he chose to take that route, I think that doomed him in the second movie. Now, I started to talk about how, the preceding reality in my life before watching the second movie wasn't ideal for enjoying it. But I was hoping that it
Sure.
would be the kind of thing that would kind of allow for an intelligent bit of escapism that would allow for consolation in the Tolkienian sense. Such was not to be the case. Immediately, it felt to me that movie two was like a mirror image of movie one.
So let me ask you a prefatory question here.
Yeah.
Um, do you believe from the in the books
Mhm.
that Paul is a false messiah? Like, is
Okay.
he
Thank you.
intended to
Thank you for
be?
being so prescient. Are you
Yeah,
sure you're
well,
not ingesting some spice with your
I'm
coffee?
definitely drinking coffee. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So,
so is Paul a false messiah in the book? I mean,
okay.
I
So,
think I think that especially like Dune and Dune Messiah,
yeah.
like this would be an interesting question to ask in the light of those books. So,
So I refer everyone to the conversation that our dear friend Cindy, who's here in the chat, had with um, had on the second episode of the Doxicon Redux podcast, which everybody should be listening to.
oh,
It's really
nice.
good with Father David Subu, where he talks about messianic imagery
Hmm.
in the movies and in the books. Sorry, remix, not yes, Redux remix. Sorry, Cindy. Doxicast remix. That's the one. It will
You're
be in
canceled
the
now.
it will be in the YouTube video. It will be in the
Do
description,
we the
properly
little
formatted. Because I
the
have a
do we
video guy now who does all this stuff for me, so I don't have to be an idiot about it. It's great. It's wonderful. Okay, so I'll refer you people to that conversation. It goes into depth about all that. Also, watch the keynote address that Father David did at this year's Doxicon, which was really good, and it was a development of this theme. And we don't have enough time to get into the details. But I'll just tell you about my personal thing. All right, so I love the Dune series. I've never gotten to the end of it in terms of reading it. I got stopped at Heretics. I didn't get to Dune Chapter House, and so keep that in mind. I don't have the full picture, so I'm not somebody to look at as kind of a holder of canon as something sacred in the Dune universe. Personally, I love the first novel, and if none of the other novels were ever written, I would be happy.
that's yeah, that's right.
And I'll explain why. The first novel is very ambiguous in terms of the author's perspective on the
Mhm.
messianic calling of Paul. Uh,
Yep.
the stuff that Paul does and the stuff that happens to him seems a combination of fate and providence, and it's unclear whether it's mostly deterministic or if there's
Right.
something at work that is perhaps something like the collective unconscious, because he was very influenced by Jungian psychology, and having read, by the way, another plug recently, I've been reading Paul Kingsnor's series of Into the Void, and he talked about how Jung specifically talked about Germany during the time of Hitler as being possessed by the spirit of Wotan. Now, he wasn't talking literally this a kind of demonic spirit, but the way he talked about it is almost the same as
Yeah,
an Orthodox ascetic would talk about an actual possession by an actual demon. So as far as I'm concerned, we're talking about the same thing. So
sure.
that being the case, you can read Dune 1, the novel, as a Christian, and no, Dune Frank Herbert is by no means a Christian, but you can read it and you can find a lot of very uplifting and transformative truths in it, because he's talking about the nature of a messianic calling or a heroic calling in a very realistic and historical way that I think is compelling and is not prescriptive and is not propagandizing and is not it's a very different kind of storytelling style than what we get these days.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to have one dominating theory about what the author believes if you read only book one, because what Paul does, it's unclear. It's unclear whether what he's doing is a good thing or a bad thing.
Hmm.
And if you only go by the almost comically cheerful end of a hero's journey mood that happens at the end of book one, excuse me, it's almost hilarious at how closely he skews to the archetypal structure of the hero's journey, so that
Right.
you're at the end of his ascension to the emperorship and you're almost meant to think this is the happy ending,
Yeah.
but it's very clearly ironic. And it's kind of, as the Russians say, it's laughter through tears, which is a very Russian expression. um and the rest of the series is basically there to disabuse you of the notion that this was a proper hero's journey. But I like my proper hero's journey, so I'd prefer it if he ended it at book one, and I'd prefer that Villeneuve allowed for the ambiguity that Herbert so clearly infused into his story, so that we could watch this thing happening
Yeah.
without it being shoved down our throats that this is a false Messiah and that he is deliberately manipulating a credulous ancient people uh,
Yeah.
based on very 20th century or 21st century methods of um, propaganda that is very different, and I would say even foreign, to the deep and high concepts that that Herbert is espousing in the story. So
Yeah.
let me talk about a few specific scenes, and this has to do with the ecology too. The scene where, first of all, Stilgar in the first book is an imposing figure.
Hmm.
Um, what's his name? The Spanish actor. He's
Uh,
really,
Bartem?
yeah, Javier Bardem. Yeah,
Bardem.
he's
Yeah.
fantastic, and
Yeah.
especially if you've seen No Country for Old Men before watching Dune, that I recommend you watch it in that order, because Stilgar in movie one has and Anton Chigurh vibes, and you don't know if
Is
Paul
this
is
a
going to
good?
survive or not. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
really
Yeah.
it's very effective. So that the battle
Yeah.
with what's his name, Jamis, I forgot
Yeah.
his name, is, you don't know what's going to happen unless you've read the book. In the second movie, it is such a harsh and grating um,
He becomes
change. Comic
kind of just
relief. He becomes
yeah.
comic relief.
Yeah.
Now, to have Stilgar become comic relief is such an insult to the memory of the book Stilgar that I don't understand what happened. It's like it's like two completely different characters, because Stilgar is a profoundly interesting character in the books, and for him to become this credulous religious idiot in movie two, it just removes so much of the nuance that I understand it's a movie. You sometimes have to do that kind of thing. You have to kind of become more archetypal, but be more archetypal and less categorical about what you do. You know what I mean? Like he becomes a joke version of Stilgar, and obviously you have to remove him from any connection with Chani at that point, which is also unfortunate. Um,
Right.
but so what really bothered me there is how, okay, so the fact that he's this credulous religious idiot is a problem, but fine, whatever, I'm willing to overlook that. What really bothered me was the scene where he shows Jessica the reservoirs of water.
Yes.
Now, there's an entire video out there. I shared it in the Discord channel, by the way,
Mm,
for people who are in my Patreon community, where this guy, in the vein of the cosmic skeptic, this young atheist guy, did a 20-minute long video showing how that movie scene perfectly encapsulates the abusive psychology of religion in the use of taboos to control populations. And so there was this entire video that was very well reasoned and very intelligent from an atheist perspective about how the movie shows the limitations of a religious worldview, specifically by the use of taboos within credulous religious societies. And I'm like, the taboo doesn't exist. It's a made up thing. There is
right.
no taboo in the Fremen culture regarding water. I have
Right.
no idea why Denis Villeneuve decided to make the water thing a taboo, because it doesn't make any sense. The purpose of having the reservoirs of water is entirely connected to the ecological subtext of the novels, in that this is how they're going to make Arrakis into a
Yeah.
paradise. What otherwise? What is the point of your existence as a Fremen? You have the worst possible existence you can. It's about the same as the slaves on Seleucus Secundus. So why do you exist?
Right.
For what? For what reason? There is no reason to exist in the world of the movies. You just
Yeah.
so why? Why do you even persist as a society? It makes no sense.
Yeah, and I should mention the reason that the similarities between Seleucus Secundus and Arrakis are so important to Herbert is because Herbert is very much of the good times create weak men, weak times
Yes.
create bad times
Yes.
create strong men. Like that's basically the premise of the entire his entire cosmology.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so in that sense, like the the mining spice, like harvesting spice on Dune and allowing the sandworms to live keeps Dune a desert planet, allows everything else to go on, but it's also creating these harsh environments which allows the Fremen to become this incredible fighting force because basically they have the worst life in the galaxy, right? And yet you're right, there's no taboo around water. Now, like they you could say like fetishize water in the books, like in terms
Mhm.
of like you have to save it, you have to write
Yes.
all those
Yes.
different things,
Yes.
but
That's very
like
different.
but yeah, it's real different. But there's not but it's not just like, oh yeah, here's all this great water that we're not allowed to touch or something like that. Yeah, yeah,
So that really bothered me because it showed a fundamental misunderstanding of the project of the Bene Gesserit. Because what the Bene Gesserit are doing is, yes, trying to use the natural human impulse towards the ineffable, towards religion, towards messianic
yeah,
figures, especially in post Islamic cultures such as the Fremen are,
right,
in order to then plant the seeds of eventual domination, as they're doing in all the different planets.
right,
But the whole point of this is that it's a project that they lose control of. This
right,
is not the Kwisatz Haderach is not the top of the pyramid. He is the bomb that explodes the pyramid.
right,
He and the way that the movie treats it, Paul is he doesn't want to do this. He's mad at his mom for doing it, but he is fulfilling the dictates of the Bene Gesserit plan at every single stage. While in the books, he doesn't do that. He's not supposed to be the Kwisatz Haderach. This is the whole point. This is the point that Denis Villeneuve missed. He's not the genetically ideal candidate to be the Kwisatz Haderach. It's supposed to
right.
be the next generation. He wasn't supposed to be born as a man. He was supposed to be a girl, because he was
I
supposed
don't
to
think they
marry
I don't think
Feyd-Rautha, and
I
their
don't
child
think
was
they
supposed to be.
mention I don't think they mention that at all in the
No,
films either.
they don't. No, they
By
don't.
the way, do you know can I tell you a spoiler for Chapter House Dune?
Yes.
At the end of Chapter House Doom, it's revealed that the real Kwisatz Haderach was Duncan Idaho all along.
Are you serious?
I am 100% dead serious.
Wait, which one? The Gola or the real one? Or does it matter?
Well, because like all the Golas have like this gestalt consciousness.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so anyway, if you like Duncan Idaho, he's the real Kwisatz Haderach, and you have no way of knowing that because he dies so early in the first book.
Okay.
Chapter House, I don't really enjoy anything after. I mean, like I wouldn't say I hate it, but the basically God Emperor of Dune is where I stop.
Okay. I,
Like
I actually enjoy Heretics. I think it's fun. I think it's totally insane, but I think it's fun.
yeah, that's completely fair. Like to me, like Leto's Golden Path, that's really like the best. demonstration or like development of Herbert's whole kind of cycle that he's focused on. And so at that point it's like, okay, well, we said the thing we wanted to say, and after that,
So, okay, so one of the things that
yeah.
Damien Walter mentions is that most people who read Dune fail to recognize the fact that him writing uh the God Emperor of Dune was supposed to make you hate the Golden Path, not accept it as the only path for humanity.
Yeah, I understand, but it's he really messes up in that case,
He
because
does.
you're like, okay, well, I guess this really is the final telos of Herbert's worldview. I mean, like, if your whole idea is like we need to create bad conditions so that humanity will thrive, like
Mhm.
that's that's the golden path, man.
I know and this is one of the great things about Herbert's oeuvre is that it feels to me like he's operating on two levels, on the level of his heart and level of his head, and the two of them are constantly at war.
That is a great way to put that.
And I
So I
love that.
I think that, well, to me, that's part of what makes it so fun,
Yes.
that makes this world so fun. So I think a lot of what you're saying strikes me, and this is a thought that I did have from watching the second movie. So we're, pretty religious people here on this
Yeah.
conversation. Um, and I mean that in like the, all the senses, like the ritual sense, cultic
Mhm.
sense, like whatever you want to call it, right? Okay. So,
Right.
um, nobody in Hollywood knows how to
Yeah.
make a
Yeah.
realistic looking religion.
Yes.
It's so bad.
Yes.
It's so bad. The acolyte, the few scenes that I saw of the acolyte,
Oh, come on. That all you
clearly
need to do is
suffer
watch that
from
one
that.
scene on repeat that everybody keeps
That
repeating.
was pretty much it. That was pretty much it. But no, but I mean, but I had that feeling a couple of times in Dune too.
Yeah.
Like, I had
Yeah.
that feeling of they're trying to. So, for, again, people who aren't aware, the Fremen are, their religion is called, in the Herbert books, is called Zen Sunni, which
Hmm.
is basically, it's a combination of Zen Buddhism and Sunni Islam. Don't ask. I don't
Yes.
know.
I don't know how you make that,
I
but
have
anyway.
no, but basically there's the Orange Catholic religion, which is basically orange as in Protestant, Catholic as in Catholic. It's the space Christianity, and
Yeah.
then there's the Zen Sunni, which is space Islam slash Buddhism, and those are the two main religions.
Yeah.
And then whenever Paul becomes emperor, he basically forcibly, he jihads everybody and makes everybody also Zen Sunni. But anyway, okay, so
Or
there,
something like that.
or something like that, but Herbert's not terribly interested in religion. And I will say that if the films do have a lot of this, like, religion as like levers to control society,
Yeah.
to be fair, Herbert really, that's the main way he's interested in his books too, I think.
Yes. Fine. Except and this is the head and the heart thing.
Yeah,
Um, allows for, just in the drama of the stories themselves, he allows for the possibility of forces outside of man's control to be active. And I think that he would have talked about them as Jungian archetypes.
yeah,
But if you're absolutely honest about it, you can't, like, even if you're calling them Jungian archetypes, the point is that Jung's philosophy is all fine and dandy inside an academic space. If you
right,
take it out into the real world, there's functionally no difference between the actions of principalities and
right,
powers and the unconscious actions of archetypes coming out through the collective unconscious
right.
of a nation. I mean, there's really no difference. So yes, he is talking about that, and yet he can't seem to get away from this impulse that suggests that you need to have, that you can't just get rid of it. It's not like Warhammer 40K or 30K in the Horus Heresy, where the Emperor declares, and I don't know what I'm talking about here, so forgive me, but basically it's like a universal human culture of secularity, right?
Yeah,
Which
so
which he
I'm
then
just gonna say,
undercuts later on. But
I'm just sorry, I just have to say, that is the cause of all of the problems in the Warhammer universe. And so
okay,
one of the fundamental underlying assumptions of the Warhammer universe is that worship is inevitable. And so he's like, guys, don't worship me. I'm not a god. And then you're like, well, then why are you a 12-foot tall golden man? Like, like with like unlimited psychic abilities. Like,
Hmm.
what exactly do you think a god is? But anyway, so one of the Horus Heresy books that you should read.
Hmm.
It is not a fun time, but it is a pretty good book, and it basically is what sets all this up, and it's exactly the thing we're talking about right now. It's called First Heretic.
Hmm.
So it's one of the 30K novels, but you can read it as a standalone. It's about Lorgar, who's the founder of is the Primarch of the Word Bearers Legion.
Hmm.
And basically they're the ones that really start the heresy. Now you're gonna meet a stupid person
Okay.
named Erebus in the Horus Heresy novels. He is a word bearer.
Okay.
But anyway, but First Heretic is the basically origin story of the word bearers, and basically it's they basically start a religion, and then the emperor punishes them really badly, and then they say, well, screw you, we're gonna go find some other god to worship, and they go and find chaos, right? So
Ouch.
so basically the one of the things that the Horus heresy is about is sort of like the failure of secularism, on a massive scale. But in any case, so this is the where the head and heart thing kind of cross, and I don't think the films the second film did a really poor job, and I think most of this is accountable to there's probably another hour somewhere in the middle that
Yeah.
got cut out. We'll talk about this in a minute,
Yep.
but it did basically nothing at all to show us like the process of uh what the spice like what the pre-spice mixture and like what the water of life actually did to Paul.
Well, plus the whole process of him ingesting it was
Right.
was done
Right.
incorrectly.
Right. Everything
Not.
about that was, well, everything about that scene was terrible and cut badly and had lots and lot. I mean, there was a period there. So I just finally got around to watching the second movie with my wife because we're just at that stage in life. You're gonna
Yep.
recognize this where it's impossible to get to a theater, right?
Yep.
So the other night we sat down. I was like, all right, I'm gonna have this conversation with Father Deacon. I should go ahead and sit down and watch the second movie. And there was a point like halfway through the movie or
Yeah.
right around the middle, for about 20 minutes, I just felt like I was having a stroke because I was like there was no continuity from shot to shot.
Yeah.
Like in this one shot, she's over here, and the next shot, she's right here, but we never saw her walking across the room, or
Yeah.
and it wasn't like, and then like
Well,
he's like,
that's intentional.
I'm never no, 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 no. In this particular one, it was not
Oh,
intentional. Like
really?
it was very much something cut out of this. And then
Okay.
and then all of the he's like, I can't go south, I can't go south, I can't go south.
Yeah.
I've gone south.
Yeah.
Wait a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah.
When did you decide to do
Yeah.
this?
He doesn't. He
And
just goes. Yeah.
why is Chani coming in on a flyer whenever, like, where was she? What was going,
Yeah.
and so there's just all these different things where it's really, really clear that there was and so eventually like I was going insane. So I had to go look on the internet, and apparently pretty much everybody who's watched the movie noticed the same problem that
Oh,
I
interesting.
noticed. And so if you do a little digging, what you'll find is that the original cut for Dune 2 is gonna be something like 4 hours.
Wow.
And all of that footage still exists. And so what I'm really hoping is that eventually we're going to get
Director's
a
cut.
director's cut, which would give us a sense of
His vision
um
for it. Yeah.
give us a sense of its actual vision, because I like the in the way that I said the first film is all this kind of like single tableau for me.
Yeah.
The second film is really choppy and it's badly edited. And I don't necessarily think that's the director's fault. Apparently, there were some timeline problems and some budget problems from the studio, and they
Yeah.
basically made him hack it way down.
Well, the first
Um,
movie made just enough for them to greenlight a sequel, but it
yeah,
didn't make enough for
yeah,
him to have full
yeah.
creative control. And
So,
I mean,
so
his choice to compress the timeline also didn't help.
yeah, 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 yeah. That was tricky too. So, in any case, yeah, I liked the second movie fine, but
Yeah.
I definitely felt like it what I was seeing probably wasn't the actual movie as it was intended to be, for one thing.
Mm,
And then secondly, I really thought that the religious elements of the second movie were very, very hackneyed.
yeah.
They were very, very like I went out to Wikipedia and I looked up some things about Islam, and then
Mm,
we based a vague space religion on this stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, well, it would have been better to should not show this than to show it badly. And then also just the fact that once again, like we see Spice doing all of this stuff to different people, but there's absolutely nothing to explain like why it's doing this, or what even is Spice, or like why is Paul different now? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Paul has prescient abilities. What's this all about? And then another thing. Okay, I said I wasn't going to rant, but The way, okay, so the way that Fade Raltha destroys the siege in the,
Yeah.
so it's very different from the way that it's very different from the way that it's done in the film, in the books. Basically, that's how they destroyed the Atreides compound at the beginning, right? But
Yeah.
when Paul's like, "Oh, my prescient abilities can pick up on this and everything," that the basically the idea is in Dune, prescients can't see what each other are going to do.
Yeah.
Like that you can't predict the acts of other prescients, which
Right.
is why Paul is such a problem because he's such a powerful prescient that none of the navigators who are like the
That's
main
right. They
prescients
can't
you
see what he's
normally have
gonna do.
access to, they
Yeah.
can't see him at all, right?
He's a blind spot. Yeah.
He's a blind spot. So the idea is that Fade Ralpha is like Paul in a certain way, and
Yeah.
that's why Paul can't see what he's doing. But all of the stuff I'm basically inferring because I've read Dune a bunch,
Yeah.
and there's
It's
really
true.
nothing.
The movies are
Yeah.
not as, yeah, you really do need to read. So this
Yeah.
is an interesting. So I have to actually run, unfortunately, and
Ugh.
all these conversations could go on forever. So we always have to end them at some odd and unsatisfactory point. But a final takeaway is read the book before you watch the movie, and your experience and enjoyment of the movie will be greatly enhanced
Right.
because you will really appreciate how much Villeneuve loves the source material and how in little small touches in both movies he puts in some
Yeah.
really beautiful things, and even and his impulses are in his decisions to change things. We didn't even talk about Chani. And maybe we'll just do an entire episode someday on
Yeah. Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the on how messed up Chani is, but um, you could still see that he had in mind a 3 movie arc that includes Dune Messiah, and this whole
Yeah.
thing is in service of Dune
That
Messiah.
is that is so that's a big question I have. Like, are they going to do a third movie? Do you know?
They are,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
they are.
Good. That's
So,
good.
well, this conversation is suspended until we've watched the third one, and
Sounds good.
then we can add our final
And
thoughts to it.
let's definitely also yeah, Southern Fundies and Chinese tears and nukes. That's it. Let's
There you
also
go.
tell me, so which horse sea book are you on right now?
The first one.
First one. Okay. All right. So whenever you are maybe get as far as the Flight of the Eisenstein or something like that, let's definitely have a little Horus Heresy chat.
All right.
I think that would be really fun. People have actually been on me for years now to get Jonathan to do a video on 40K. But I, it's like anyway, so but this would be
We'll
the
do the next best
be
thing.
the best
We'll do
format.
Jonathan Light.
I don't. Oh, no, 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 no. All right. Well, Father, happy birthday to you. Many
Thank you.
years. And thanks so much for having me on. And we'll do this again.
So we're going to talk about Andor, and then I'm going to send you a reading list for a
Yeah.
survey of fantasy literature.
So I should
From
just say for everyone on the chat, I am, some of you may know that I run Symbolic World Press. And one of the great things that we have are our courses, which
Mhm.
basically it's like this kind of content, but because we're charging money for it, we're able to go just like a lot deeper. And so I am attempting to prevail on Father Deacon Nicholas to come and teach a 6-week course with me next year, which would be a survey of fantasy literature. It would be 6 weeks long, probably about 18 to 20 hours of lectures, and which is what they normally are, by the way. So just so you know,
Oh, the
because
math.
yep, yep. So yeah, so yeah, get me a reading list so I can start prepping.
And by the way, those of you who are in my Patreon community, you'll be getting that reading list as well, so you can prep properly for the
Yeah.
course.
We can also work out a discount for your Patreons whenever the course comes around. So
Hear that, people? So if you're not a patron now, join quickly so you can get
that's
discounts.
right. That's right. That's right.
Yay! Reading list
All right.
ASAP says NT. Okay, thanks, Richard. It's been a lovely chat. You've brightened my day, which has been snowy and dark.
Well, good to talk with you and happy birthday.
Thank you. All right, everybody.
Have a
See
good
you
one. Bye-bye.
next time. Bye bye.